It sounds like you had a pretty good time on the Keeping It 100 with Conan and Disco. Talk about that experience a little bit. It was a fun interview to listen back to and everything.
Yeah, disco interrupts a lot.
Yes.
uh, I it was fun, dude. What I mean, I've known him since like '92 or something, and Conan also, just he's always been around. So it was cool. What one thing that stuck out in my mind, they asked me at the end something about. They said they didn't know, but they asked about that I had heat with Jericho.
Hmm.
And at the time, I was like, he with Jericho, like Jericho was mad at me, not that I know of, you know what I mean? Like, and I just explained there was a little it was a little gruff for me adjusting to the political atmosphere coming in, and he was kind of representing the other side at that point, and but there was no heat, like, because he didn't even know. He was surprised when I said that in interviews like years later, when I said, that it was like a political fight, talking to him, because he was already part of that machine, and it was like so frustrating for me. But that was a long time ago, and that's what I answered with. But then I thought about it, and now I know what he's asking about.
Yeah.
He's asking about heat, because and this would have been great to talk about last week when we were talking about anger.
Hmm.
I feel like I've told this story so many times, but I know this is what dude was probably talking about, because I've said this on a few interviews, and he obviously heard it. But one day in WWE, they wanted to see me mad. See, they always thought that that's where money was going to be. We've never seen RVD angry. There's got to be a point where you just lose control. And I was like, man, isn't that everybody else?
Yeah.
And what's wrong with being the guy that doesn't get mad? But they always got to try the opposite of what works, whatever. But anyway, I was like, grr, okay, yeah, I got it. And I was gonna wrestle, and I was wrestling, or doing a run in at the end of the night. I'm Chris Jericho, and so all day, all the angels kept coming up to me, and they would just be like, just remember, like, mad, like, just think of something that makes you angry. I'd be like, I got it. Damn, they were. I mean,
This
they were
makes me mad. You
for
tell me.
for real, because they were picking at me like all day like that, and I was already like, good, like they had me worked up, and then before Chris goes out there, he's doing it too. And he had been also, just have something in mind, that really makes you mad. Dude, I'm a professional, bro. Right before he goes out there, he goes, just like, act like I hit on your wife. And I was just like, I went out there, I ran out there, and I was so pissed. Bam, bam, bam. I punched him in the face. I jumped up and frog splashed him, and I grabbed the belt because he was the champion at the time. Bam, and I threw it down on him. They wanted me to cover him and do my own 1, 2, 3, and I was too pissed. I forgot about it.
Yeah.
I stormed out there, and I couldn't even shower or take my clothes off. I was so mad. I had to grab my stuff and storm out of there in my wrestling gear and drive to the hotel, and I was still hot till like sometime the next morning. I don't have a big range of emotions, so when you really, I can't blame it on someone else and say when you really get me there and prove that I should be mad, but when I let myself get there is a better way to put it. But when I feel that I'm in touch with that, it's not an easy just like boom change back.
Sometimes you have to ride it out and like just be like, all right, I'm mad. I can't do anything about it right now, and that's what's gonna happen,
So I think that's probably what dude was talking about. And by the way, last week we were talking about anger, and I was trying to explain that a lot of times, like, I'll start to feel the anger coming up, but then right away it's washed off with common sense, and I got myself trained like that.
Yeah.
And I think you were like, yeah, you mean like after you've had a while to think about it? And I was like, no, like not even like a quarter second. I thought of this because one thing about talking about things like this, like my values, is when I have to articulate these thoughts in my mind, then it reassures my feelings. It also makes me more aware when that happens. You know, I'll be like, I was just talking about this. You know what I mean? And so that's good. So that's why teaching is great for learning. Paying attention, more aware of my own experiences, all that. But here's a way that I think maybe I can help the fans understand. So like so there's a ladder match with RVD and Jeff Hardy, right? Okay, the anger for me will be Jeff Hardy just climbing up to the bottom step of the ladder, right? Yeah. Right away, RVD kicks the ladder out, boom, he falls down, boom. No anger, no Jeff Hardy ascending the ladder. That's how it works in my mind. It's always over something. It's always over something stupid. I'm like, for a tiny little bit, I'll be like, "Where's the fucking lighter?" And I want to blame the only other person in the house but me that lives here, But even before it ever even becomes a real thought, it washes away right away with common sense. And then, if anything, I just kind of laugh at myself because I know that I'm the one that put the lighter, wherever it is anyway. And it's so, but that's the way it works in my head. That's as close as I get to letting myself get angry.
That's great though, but it does, like, to your point, it takes some time to kind of get used to it and be like, oh, okay, it's automatic now. But it's like, if you're cognizant of it and aware of like, hey, I'm getting mad, all right, I gotta fucking just chill out. It's not as big as a deal as I think it is. You get used to it. It's something. It's a work in progress for me. I know that much.
Yeah, well, no, that's all RVDology. Every single bit of it is about reprogramming yourself, and it's important. A lot of people never bother to reprogram themselves as adults, so they still think Santa's real. And I think it's important because people use this as an excuse too many times. I know, but I wasn't brought up that way.
Right.
So what? I was brought up in a segregated city where we had like 2 black kids in each grade. You think the white kids weren't racist then? I mean, we liked the black kids. They were cool, but they still had to put up with a lot of language and a lot of jokes and just stupid kid stuff. And thinking back at it, I can't imagine being like, well, I'm gonna stick with this because it's how it used to be when I was a kid.
Right. It's like, oh, this. I just want you don't want that.
Yeah.
You don't want that.